Well, he's an icon for minor league baseball in general and Indianapolis sports in particular. And now a new book captures the memories and accomplishments of his extraordinary career. Bill Benner has more in this week's Inside Indiana Sports. Bill.
Gary, thanks. And of course, we're talking about the incomparable Max Schumacher, who rose from ticket manager to chairman of the board of the Indianapolis Indians in a 60-year span that has seen the Indians become America's model AAA baseball franchise. And today, Max joins us alongside Mark Monteith, his co-author and collaborator on the new book, Extra Innings My Life in Baseball. And Max and Mark, welcome to the program. Max, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Let's start with you. What prompted you to try to capsulize your career in this book?
Well, I had thought about it some over the years, and a number of people had suggested that I do it, relate some of the stories that they perhaps had heard that they thought should be left behind. The board of directors eventually thought that I should do it, particularly Alan Kimball and Mary Marsh gave me a little nudge forward toward doing it, and I appreciate that. I probably would not have done it if they hadn't said they thought it would be valuable and I should do it.
Well, we're glad you did, because it's a wonderful history of not only your career but the Indians in particular. Mark, talk about working with Max. I mean, you've done Gene Cady and you've done Pacers books. What was it like working with this legend?
Yeah, it was great. You know, I had met Max once before when I had a radio show, but I spent many an afternoon over at his residence on the Northwest Side and just got the stories, you know. And you know, I grew up in Indianapolis, and I know the history of the Indians, and I know what minor league baseball is like, but it was great to be able to hear the inside stories of what goes on in the front office, what goes on the airplanes, that kind of thing. You know, the Pacers have been here since 1967, the Colts since 1984. The Indians have been here just about forever, going back to the 1800s. So, as you can imagine, there are a lot of stories to tell.
Yeah, Max, we referred to you as an icon, and accurately so in the open, but you were friends with a couple of icons. One dearly departed this week, Senator Richard Lugar. You were his classmate at Shortridge, and then Tony Hinkle, the coach for all seasons.
Well, yes, I was, and I met Dick Lugar. We had gone to different grade schools, so we met as freshmen at Shortridge, and our friendship flourished over the years. You know, everything he did with Dick Lugar was very positive, and you know, he would. I know I mentioned to Mark one time that Dick had his license to drive before I did, and when we would go places, you know, he'd be looking down at his speedometer. If the sign at the side of the road said 30 miles an hour, he'd drive 29 or 30. He wouldn't think about driving 31. Once in a while, we would bet on attendance at ball games at Butler Fieldhouse, and his standard bet, he'd bet a dime. That was his limit. What would be the attendance? And we'd say a dime.
Talk about Tony Hinkle.
Tony Hinkle, of course, was my baseball coach, and as a freshman, when uniforms were issued, I was not issued a uniform. When I got out there for the first home game of the year, Charlie McElfresh said, "Hey, kid, we found a uniform for you. So you want to get dressed for the game today?" So I said, yeah, I would. I just planned to watch the game up in the stands, watch the upperclassmen play. He said, well, so here's a uniform. So I put it on. I went down, sat at the end of the bench. I thought I would just be an observer. And so the game starts, Butler comes to bat, and the bottom of the first inning, he says, "Hey, Shuey," he says, "go coach third base." So that's what I did for 2 years before I got to play. But he had interesting signals. He kept score. You know, he didn't coach on the lines. Well, I coached third, and another player would coach first. But he'd keep score on the bench, and then he'd put the book up. The book meant seal. Well, occasionally when they were pitching out on us a lot, he'd call a little meeting and call us over, and he says, "If I don't cross my legs, it doesn't count." That was the variation, book up and the legs crossed. And the other one that Mark particularly liked, finally when I was a senior.
Quickly, because we had to wrap up.
Yeah, when I get up to home plate, he'd call to you if he wanted you to bunt, "Hey, push them along. So I said to him one day, I said, you know, if I can hear you say push them along, don't you think the catcher can hear also? He said, do you think he believes me?
Mark, where can we get this book?
All local bookstores, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, at the gift shop at Victory Field. It's available there, and of course on Amazon.com.
And all the Indians greats that Max has got great stories about all the Indians greats, and there were a lot of greats that passed through. Max, we love the fact that you did this. Mark, great work on your collaboration as well.